Welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnight Fridays.
where we cover everything dynamics, great and small. So, how are you doing today, Bart?
I am doing fantastic. Dan, how about you?
Doing well, doing well. Last one I said, it's like, the next time we meet is meteorological spring. It's here.
It
So,
is here. And
yeah,
it didn't feel like it on Wednesday, but it's feeling much more like it today.
yeah. I was out of town and my wife didn't really know how to use the snowblower. So, I heard a little bit about that. So, there's,
Yeah. I had a little of that same thing. I was up in the cities. I stayed overnight close to work since I knew I had to be in early Wednesday morning, and it was that blizzardy, crappy stuff. And the next day, my wife and my son were like, Dad, what's this lever supposed to do?
well, it's like since Mother Nature's playing a joke on us, do you have a good dad joke?
Well, good is a stretch, but I'll at least try.
Does it categorize as a dad joke? Maybe we should say that. Yeah.
How about this? It's more of a quiz today.
Okay.
What is the longest word in the English language?
I'm gonna go with the supercalifragilistic.
Oh man, I knew you'd go there.
You know this, because but that's your leading me, buddy. I'm
It's
following the breadcrumb trail.
it's smiles because there's a
Smiles.
mile between the first and last letter.
Wow, that's categorized as a dad joke. So it's
Right,
actually
that's
pretty
right
good
in
if you
that
think
dad
about
joke
it.
realm, huh?
Okay, so I'm going to the
Oh,
dad joke card because it's like these aren't super bad always. Okay, what do you call it when a group of 8 start a company?
group of eights,
Apes.
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 Oh,
Yeah. Monkey business. All
wow.
right, let's see our content's way, way better than our dad jokes. So, what do you got for me, Bart?
Well, let's start off with just a quick advertisement, actually, that there were some really good things posted. This one is just letting people know that there is a new talk out there on adoption.microsoft.com related to Power Platform called Governance and Security in Power Platform and Copilot Studio. And it is talking quite a little bit about some of the features that are already live and a whole bunch of stuff that is coming in the next month or two and what kinds of things that'll mean. And I think it was really well done. So I'm just recommending everybody take a peek at that worries about governance in Power Platform because we're doing more and more things right in the PPAC that are going to be super helpful. This next one is actually more of a Power BI feature than directly a Dynamics thing, but it was a good enough blog post I thought it was worth mentioning. So for anyone who's using Dynamics Contact Center or really doing any Dynamics reporting out of the CE platform coming from Dataverse, where you're using direct query to query Dataverse, I actually didn't know this, but in Power BI, when you set up a direct query to Dataverse, it sets the limit of simultaneous connections to 10. And for any larger organization, you're probably going to have more than 10 people trying to access a report at one time. But this is going to throttle and only allow kind of 10 connections to happen at the same time for the same report that's used in that same direct query. So the recommendation is to go into Power BI and increase that limit from the default of 10 to 300, 500, 1,000, however many you think would be relevant for simultaneous users trying to do this. Now, recognize that if you do have a whole bunch of simultaneous users hitting that same report, if it's doing a direct query, that will be hitting Dataverse harder and harder and harder as more and more people put load on it. So be judicious and try to keep it to a reasonable number, but 10 is probably too low. I don't know, 500 might be too high. So figure out what works for your organization, but I thought that was a good tip. Next one, we're talking about a new governance control, and this is actually live now. Nope, this is different. This isn't the governance. I got two of them confused. So this one is actually a tips and tricks on what the steps are that are needed to make sure that you put authentication on a Copilot Studio agent that you're planning to publish to the external world, but you want to require authentication so that the people who are chatting with that agent, who are your customers, your partners, somebody outside your organization, can still authenticate in and get at data that you secured in wherever you've got that secured with their identities using external IDs from Intra ID. So if you have that use case and you've struggled with this, this is a pretty nice how-to blog post of how to go set all that stuff up. So sorry, I got those confused in my head. I've got one coming up in just a minute that'll be more obvious in terms of why I got them confused. But another great blog post from the Forward Forever folks over in the Scandinavian world that give a pretty nice overview of why you might want to set up Power Platform integration with Azure Virtual Networks, kind of what that VNet integration does for you, and then a lot of tips and tricks about how to do it. What are the prerequisites, and what kinds of things with some code samples that you have to do. What do you have to do in Azure? What do you have to do in Power Platform? You can see it kind of goes on and on and on. It's a really well done, thoughtfully laid out guidance on how to do that at scale. Then we've got a new feature directly in Power Apps, and this is a Canvas app feature that you now can go to Code View, and that is generally available. And when you're in Code View, it really helps both understand what's going on if you are more of a dev and you understand how to read YAML and PowerFX. But it also makes it easier to copy and paste elements and make kind of templates that don't have the entire app, but just have parts, because you can just go in and if you know what you're looking at from the YAML, you can just grab the various piece parts that you wanted and move forward with that. So you can copy and paste the code, you can copy and paste the components themselves, and lots of those kind of things. When we went generally available with it, we did some improvements to the way it lays out to make it a little bit more readable. So nice to know. And if you have set up Dataverse source control with the Git integration there, that part's still in preview as far as I know, but this new improved code format now works cleanly with that if you want to do a little more of that direct Git integration for committing builds directly through that interface instead of saving it to the solution and waiting for the solution movement to put those components out into your Git repository. So nice to know this new code view is generally available and when you might use it. All kinds of interesting things in Copilot Studio that have come out. And this is kind of the February release. It's kind of nice to know that the Copilot Studio folks have decided to do a lot of the same things for Copilot Studio that Clay Wiesner has done for a while for the Power Apps world. And we'll be getting to one of those in a little bit. But in Copilot Studio, we've got the ability to take custom agents, so ones that were completely built just in Copilot Studio, and publish those to Copilot Chat and or M365 Copilot's agents capability. So the ability to make one that is available from there so that it didn't have to be just an extension in M365. It can do all the things that a regular Copilot can do, but be visible from there is now possible. So nice to know. Some new graph connectors for those of you familiar with the Office 365 graph extenders that we've now got Stack Overflow, Salesforce Knowledge, GitHub, and Unily that are available to configure so that they can become enterprise knowledge sources in Copilot Studio for asking questions of that information and have it return back whatever it's supposed to. You can configure security on those if you've got security set up in them, where some things are available to one group of people and other things are available to another group based on the security that's put on. You can do all those things. Importing and exporting agent components in Copilot Studio is definitely here now, and you can use component collections and do all of the kind of solution management with pieces or the entire bot that you want to be able to do that's kind of fully integrated, and it's all the way into the Copilot Studio UI to be able to do those things. And those reusable component collections can be super helpful to try to make sure that if you make something that is a piece of a Copilot, just like if you had made components that were pieces of a Canvas app and you wanted to be able to share just those chunks of functionality, that's now all possible. We've made some nice improvements in the analytics area. So looking at actions and what has gone on within that actions, looking at the transcripts and getting all the detail that you want. We've made some nice improvements from that standpoint. And we've made Copilot Studio available in the GCC cloud. So that's nice including the analytics pieces that we just turned on. We made some nice improvements in cross-prompt injection attack protection and improved the M365 SDK, which is kind of the latest version of like the bot framework direct line capabilities. It used to be only available in C Sharp, but we have now expanded that to include JavaScript. So you can write JavaScript versions of your agents that can connect back to the business logic that's being executed inside of Copilot Studio, just like you could do the same thing with C Sharp earlier using that. The embedded agent builder, there are a few new updates as well. So the biggest one from my standpoint is you can put any website in here. It doesn't have to just be a SharePoint website anymore, and you can scope that right in that sort of simple agent builder experience. So that's pretty awesome. And there was one other one. Oh, feedback. That it's built right into it to allow users to submit feedback now. So I don't think that one's quite as big a deal for most makers, but for users to be able to give our product team feedback, not your dev team's feedback, is now built into that. Okay, the admin controls that I was kind of hinting at earlier when I got confused over what we were doing. This is now Power Pages being able to scope whether authentication providers are available for one of those Power Pages or not. You can, as an admin, go in and say, it's available for any Power Page in my entire tenant, or you can say, I am going to set this up so that the external authentication is available for these 25 sites and none others, or for all sites except those two. So kind of have a nice set of controls to be able to restrict some sites from allowing external authentication, where others you are kind of going to at least enable it. This doesn't force it to happen. The maker still has to go in and configure it and start setting things up so that the end users kind of are required to do it. But you can keep that from even being an option now if you want across the various Power Pages in your tenant. All right. The two most recent announcements are kind of finished products. And these two finished products aren't purely Dynamics or Power Platform products. So in some ways, I maybe shouldn't even cover these, but they're big enough news, I think I might as well talk about them. So in D365, we have some of that agentic capability that comes with your D365 license. You've also got some other kind of co-pilots that are built in. So there's kind of agents that are going and doing work on your behalf that are autonomous, that are part of D365. And there's agents that are available as helpers that you can kind of chat with to just ask questions about your data. And so those have both been there, but these new features called the sales agent and the sales chat are actually M365 Copilot-like agents. So they are kind of ubiquitous. They should be able to live basically in that M365 ecosystem. And they are set up to do all kinds of things, to look across the graph, to look at public data, and to connect to whichever of the CRMs between Dynamics and Salesforce that you want to connect them to. So they're kind of like Copilot for Sales in being able to connect to either of those CRMs, but they're pre-configured to do a lot more agentic work than Copilot for Sales did. They aren't, though, natively integrated into Outlook and some other places the way Copilot for Sales was. So they're different, and they'll all kind of coexist. So take a look at these if you're interested. And there's some new capabilities that we brag about what some of our customers are already doing. And then if you are interested in some of this stuff, there is a new program. You have to kind of work through your account teams, but talk to your account teams about the Microsoft AI Accelerator for Sales if you want to get a little bit of kind of personalized guidance set up from some Microsoft experts, kind of including some of our R&D team, to talk about how AI might change your sales team's functionality. So nice to know that's there. More about it available at that next link. I'm not going to click into it since I just talked basically about it. PowerCat tools, I know I introduced kind of last show, but we've got a nice blog post that talks a lot more about what these various components are within the PowerCat tools. So one of the biggies is code review. And this does work across the entire solution, where a long time ago we had a code review that was really just for Canvas apps, but this now looks at everything that's in the solution. Solution documentation, the risk assessment, an API playground that's kind of like the Dataverse Accelerator. I talked about some of these things, so I'm not going to go through a whole bunch more, but just a nice write-up on PowerCat tools. If you haven't installed them yet, at least some environment to start looking at things, you really should. Copilot Studio, there's just so much stuff out there that it's hard to say what you should pay attention to, what you shouldn't, because there's blog posts and videos all over the place. But this team is really the product evangelism team who've put together a lot of these things with a bunch of videos and descriptions of what they are. So they've made kind of a, I don't know, greatest hits, if you will, saying there's quite a few topics that have been coming up regularly. So we've got videos about them and wanted to make sure people were aware. So take a look at this. And if any of those topics apply to something you're trying to accomplish, these videos are extremely well done. So take advantage. I talked about Clay Wiesner earlier and his Power Apps monthly updates. So here is this one. I think a lot of it we've already talked about. Code View, talked about earlier today. PowerCat Tools, talked about it earlier today. PowerFX Functions in public preview was last show. The environment groups capabilities where they have added in the ability to use environment groups and adding in AI prompts, AI powered Copilot features, and Power Apps component framework for Canvas apps as ways you can manage that just by the group membership is new. So that one I thought was pretty helpful. Visualize with Copilot, we've already talked about, and then a bunch of the documentation updates. It's great to always look through these. I'm not going to try to pick and choose which ones might be relevant to you. All right. Most of the rest, one more, I guess, kind of bigger announcement on the Power Pages side of things. So another new feature in Power Pages is as long as you are using the new enhanced data model, we are now allowing you to set environment variables that can house site settings, so that the site settings can be set in differently in dev than they are in QA than they are in prod by those environment variables. It's a much simpler, better way to manage those site settings between promoted versions of your site as you're building enterprise grade versions of these. So please take advantage if that applies to you. The rest of these are really more announcements that come out in the Office 365 announcements area for your admins, but there were a few of them that were so Power Platform specific and that almost everybody kind of needs to know that I thought people would want to know. So first one is on April 7th, the default search experience, which has always kind of been regular search, and you had to go in and toggle Dataverse search to be on if you were willing to use it, is going to change. As of April 7th, that toggle will just be on for environments that Dataverse search will be the default. So thought you would want to know that and know that it is used across all these various experiences in all these various ways. So it's a pretty big deal. Power Platform Admin Center is getting big enough now that they are incorporating a global search capability right up in the top nav bar of the PPAC, and that will search across all the various things that you can do in the Admin Center to be able to go find them. So for those of you who are administering Power Platform, that will be a very welcome capability. For people who are using the kind of document services, I guess, is the best way to explain all the various ways that we can use AI to get information from documents that we are, I think I even talked about this recently, but there's a way to extract information from documents without having to train models anymore. You don't have to like give it 5 examples and then go tell it what the various fields are, that there's a way to use the large language models to extract that information with a lot less effort and training. So if you want to start switching things over and trying this new extract information from documents with the GPT, it is out there. So good thing to be aware of. That comes generally available on the 31st. That global search is going to be generally available by the 31st of this month. And then a last one that's by the 31st of this month, is that Power Apps is launching a new API called the Power Platform User Content API. And if you do have firewall rules that are block everything unless they're whitelisted, update this to be added to it by March 31st if you want Power Apps to continue to function with full featured functionality. Otherwise, some stuff will start getting blocked. I've only got two other things, Dan. That's everything in Power Platform. These last two are in the CE space. So if you have been using the customer voice capability to do surveys, that will still be there, still continue to exist. But if you want to start thinking about surveys a little differently and let it be more of a Copilot Studio agentic interaction, that if you make a Copilot Studio version of a survey, and we've got some nice helpers to try to make this pretty quick and easy for your developers, I guess, to build these surveys, that the really cool thing is as soon as you do, you can then publish it so that it's there for voice interactions as part of the IVR at the end of a call. It's there for live chat at the end of providing support for someone, or social channels if you want to just put it out there on all the various places you're offering support across those social channels without having to go do anything different. You could obviously just email out a link to interact with this bot at the end of something if you wanted to make it a little bit more like a typical survey experience that way too. So lots of ways you might be able to use that. If it has interest in your org, check it out. And then this last one, I don't think I'm even going to click into. It's really talking about how AI is really infusing everything in our customer insights product to inform customer journey orchestration of how to add the right content and how to understand when it's the right time to send the next interaction to the person who you're trying to drive demand with and all that kind of stuff. So if you are a marketer, it's probably worth diving into, but I've gone so long, I just needed to let Dan take over and talk about his update. So take it over, Dan.
There's so much good content coming out of the Power Platform. It's fun. So I've spent earlier this week collaborating with a couple of my buddies, colleagues, I should say, buddies, with the Power Apps plan and just kind of making goofing off and making the apps and stuff like this. And I'm still, even at this age and this maturity level in my career, I'm still just going gaga over this. I'm still amazed. So it's fun. It's fun that we can present this stuff out, Bart. But let's get to where I was, right? Or where I will be. I talked a little bit about the project operations. I didn't go so deep a couple weeks ago. A little bit about commerce and some supply chain. So I don't have a ton of stuff to go through today, but there's some nice features coming up. So let's talk about the project operations light. As I remind everybody on every show when I talk about this, it's okay, CE only for light, project operations resource based. So it's resource based, not product or stocked, but integrates in with budgeting and the integration with the invoicing and things like that. And then stock based, which is the old PMA module, which is really it's project operations within the F&O module. So I'm going to cover those three things. So again, starting out with the light, CE only, not integrated back into components, but there's three new features in this release. This actually was the February release on this, but I wanted to go back because I didn't have enough time to go through everything. So the first one is the mobile time entry components, right? So as a mobile device, we just want to make it easier for anybody that's running a project to actually enter the time, materials, or not materials for this one, the time, and keep track of that, right? And against the work that's assigned to them. It also has things like, what's the submitted time, put it all together, what's the summary of last week, and then, what's the dedicated periods that we have that we can turn them into to entries themselves. So that's up with the time entry mobile app. There's also time phasing of sales estimates. I talked a little bit about this about a month ago, but the time phasing of sales estimates is you may have a cost for some labor or the cost for a developer that might be $200. But as of March 31st or April 1st, April Fool's Day is going to be $250. And so we want to make sure that we time phase that not only in the billings, but also in the project quotations. So you're not going to be surprised. So you have that visibility into price fluctuations, right, over time, right, and with all the contract times. Now, you can track these adjustments, right, and then you can always have price overrides or multiple price lists that's going to go against, right? So, and again, material is not part of these estimates, so you need to be aware of that. The next thing is progress billing in the billing hub. So the billing hub basically does a pro forma invoice. A pro forma is like not a deliverable, but this is we're going to review it, and this happens a lot in projects. So here's the pro forma invoice. If we want to see it, is we made sure we include X, Y, or Z, or this, or that, or the other thing included into this. So the project manager usually reviews that before they go out. So, but this pro forma invoice is done in the billing hub. That's where we can accumulate everything. So in the billing hub, we're going to provide you a rich consolidated view of the contract lines, the lines, the contracts, and and the actuals that are done on that. And so what's different is we used to do time and material or milestone, but this is a progress against different milestones. So it's like if you're gonna it's $100,000 project, you're 25% done for this milestone, and it's a $100,000 milestone. That's gonna be a $25,000 billing. So it'll actually do that for you on the progress billing. Before it was only milestone or time and materials that we did. So that's an update on the project light. Now, if we get the resource, this is the one that's integrated back with a true invoicing. So if we kind of scroll down and see this, so on this one, we see that we have the project ops with integration into the project line milestones, right? And on this, we have the time entry app. We've seen that before. Time phasing with sales estimates. We talked about this, but the progress billing in the billing hub, this is a little bit different, right? Because it's like we have this, but it's integrated back into an invoice. So it's like we're going to do the pro forma. We may make some changes or some edits within that pro forma, and then actually do the release on the invoice. And once you do that, it's actually going to push back into the actual application. So for those changes that you may make on some of those transaction sets. So we have that, and so that's integrated into that the deployment, and typically F&O for this resource base, right? But it does not only for the contract itself, but also the lines within that. So that's an update and kind of important with if you're doing milestone billings. Now, the last one here for project is project that's a stock based. And on the stock based, I've talked about these things before, but it's like, in the sales, we had the new sales quote form experience that I talked about. Geez, it was the end of, maybe it was January that I talked about that, which was a CE experience, a customer engagement experience that is in the F&O or the finance and supply chain world, right? But now we're allowing a price override button within this the quote. So the price override button will allow the quote detail, enable quick and easy editing. It'll allow make sure that you don't have all these clicks or have to drill down into sub menus to get anything. And from that single form, you can control the layout. You have the KPIs, reduction of just moving around or interactions with the system, right? So it's more of a scenario-based focus on that. So again, pretty interesting from that viewpoint. And the last thing is chat integrations and how to do this. And I've seen this before, but I've, for some of my colleagues that really focus on commerce, and it's just the thing that you expect. You expect either a chat with a human or an autonomous bot. And of course, we're in the AI world, so it's an autonomous bot. But this kind of shows you what it is and how to set it up. So first of all, it's like, teaches you how to set up the chat with the customized that omni-channel for customer service, right? Within the Copilot Studio. Now there's two flavors of customer service. We have the full customer service within the CE platform. Typically we sell that as its own standardized SKU, but there's also customer service within F&O. So it's a lighter weight system for that, back office, customer order taking, customer service, that we have that chat integrated into that, so you can be proactive. So they can have that autonomous chat. To start with the chat, it's omni-channel, so you have a live chat or voice or text back and forth with those customers. The second thing is we can set that up with the omni-channel with the customer service. I just talked about that. And then use the commerce with the Microsoft Copilot Studio. So if you have other information that you want to be able to pull into it, right? As Bart's been talking about for months and years now. So that's available through the chat, and how to set that up and make that available either through your e-commerce site or your customer service. But if you go into the e-commerce, if you use the Dynamics 365 e-commerce solution from our you go into that, it's considered a header fragment. That's where actually you can put those, and then you build it within your commerce site builder. That's how you build the websites within the e-commerce. So kind of goes through that, and then how to use chat with proactive chat parameters. It's like what adds contextual information about like the customer, the orders. Where do we want to pull this from? And then we can add that anywhere we want through the omni-channel and through our customer service. So it's kind of an interesting one. I went through this and I thought, I'm like on my next install that I'm going to put in the commerce, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have this set up appropriately. Now, I only have one last thing, or actually two last things, right? And another one is a chat, right? And this is chat within finance and supply chain. Now, initially when we put this out, it was really just kind of a help file within Dynamics 365. So it was a sidecar. And so you can add like additional like data sources. So like with some of my customers, they might have some information that's against a SharePoint site or against a different website or an internal thing that they want to have internally, or to be able to review that. To be able to get like a help. So it's like, think of it as like a modified search with some help. But now we can do this Copilot Studio, and we can do some things autonomously, do orders or other things. But it kind of talks about adding some different data sources, right? So whether it be virtual entities. So the virtual entities, if you can actually surface those up through F&O, through the Dataverse, and be able to get at that information and do it. Whether it be native Dataverse tables, as we do all the time, or so you pull someplace else and sync those tables, like in something like dual write, right? So it also allows you to have the data available through M365. So if you want to pull up transactional data on any purchase orders that you have within the system, with this legal entity, on Teams or any other of the M365 ecosystem, that's available to you. So this is kind of a nice article, kind of like outlining that. It's just put out a couple weeks ago. Now, the last thing, not all my customers are going to use this. I kind of mentioned purchase orders a little bit, but there's a purchase order year-end close. So if you think of year-end close, you usually think of financial information for year-end close the books, close the AR, AP, fixed assets, and then the general ledger, and post that up, right, for year-end close. Well, this is really for orgs that use the budgeting module. So if you have a budgeting module, it's like how much can you actually purchase, right, or spend within this, and it'll transfer from the end of that period at the closing period to the next one. What's we're going to shut down? What is going to roll over, and help that closing period. So what it'll do is it'll release the things in the next fiscal period and reverse things that need to be done, right, and along with those budget registries, right. So it puts it in that new line in that next open period, right? And it also takes care of encumbrances. So purchase orders are one thing. So you actually have the purchase order that's done and that's received an invoice. But an encumbrance, maybe it's a purchase order that you have a liability out there, but it's not a true liability in your books yet because you haven't received it, nor have you invoiced it yet, right? So what this does is the POs and can generate those closing entries to actually put that against budget reservations for that next period. And of course, we do that with projects, right? So a few projects, you're going to have a big project, you're going to have a budget against that project that you may or may not exceed, and these projects may go over several years. And so that's a nice posting helper for doing that year-end close. So, not a ton of content on the F&O world this year, but, some nice little nuggets there, Bart. Now, we also have the solution updates, as we always do, so make sure you check and see what updates you have within your admin center, and make sure that you have all those updated to the latest updates that you can. And then
lots of good stuff out there.
A lot of them this week, right? Or this fortnight.
Always.
Yep. And then, there's, as always, where do you get some more updates about the release schedule and what's coming up next? So that's what I have for content this week, Bart. Anything in closing?
I think that's a wrap for this session, and I think we could see everybody in a fortnight.
See you in 2 weeks, everybody.